now that there are no divisions in college football except for in the Sun Belt, there could be problems deciding will or won't make the college football, not the college football playoff, who will or won't make each conference's conference championship game. Past you had an East versus West, an Atlantic versus Coastal, Legends versus Leaders, whatever the case may be, you had that to kind of figure it out that, okay, we might only have a tiebreaker between two teams on one division. Now, you might still have a tiebreaker on two teams or three teams in your conference, and you've got to figure out who's moving on to the championship game and who might have their college football playoff hopes affected by that. So the Big Ten today released their list of here are the tiebreakers for what we're looking at in 2024 and beyond for who's going to decide who moves on. And I think it's really kind of interesting because obviously the first tiebreaker, and I think this should probably be the first tiebreaker always, is the tied teams will be compared based on head-to-head matchup, if applicable, during the regular season. If somehow, some way, for instance, Ohio State and Oregon are tied going into the conference championship game for who gets that second spot, they played each other. We can figure out who was the better of those two by what happened on the field. That seems like a logical choice to decide who's better than who. Then you go all the way down to number 6 is, tied teams will be compared based on record against all common opponents. They'll be based on record against common opponents with the best record in they'll throw one out. They'll compare based on winning percentage of all conference opponents. The representative will be chosen by the highest ranking sports source analytics. Basically saying we're going to choose by the BCS. And then finally, if it gets past that, we'll just start drawing names out of a hat, which I don't know that I could be a bigger fan of just watching on Big Ten Network and somebody's like, all right, we got the names in a hat. Here comes the commissioner. He'll swish them around a little bit and draw one of them out. Let's see what happens. I genuinely would be on the edge of my seat, not being able to wait to see what's going to happen next. Who's he going to pull out of that hat? But there seems to be a logical place somewhere in there that there is a kind of a glaring omission of what wasn't chosen as a tiebreaker that I think would be really important to the Big Ten, and I'm interested to why they didn't choose it. And that would be college football playoff rankings. Where are you ranked in the college football playoff? Because by these metrics, by these tiebreakers, you could get to a spot where somebody who, and I think it happens every year, where you see somebody might not be viewed as all that respected by the college football playoff. And then the college football playoff committee will tell you hey, we feel really strongly that this team is very good. And if your tiebreaker is rewarding the team that might not get the respect from the college football playoff that another team does, it's kind of setting your conference up for somewhat failure, right? You don't want to do anything to hurt your team's, your conference's ability to make the college football playoff. You don't, everybody's going to do whatever they can to get as many teams in the top 12 as they can. And outside of number 1, and I don't think there's a logical way to argue anything other than number 1 should be the number 1 tiebreaker. If these two teams played each other, or if these 3 teams played each other, who beat who? That should matter. What happens on the field between those painted lines should be the most important thing. And that's the easiest way to break a tiebreaker. You can't bitch later on down the season well, it's not fair. Yeah, it is. You played the game. That's what happened. But then college football playoff rankings seems like that should be, I don't know, number 2, maybe number 3 at the worst, because that's sort of the whole point of the conference championship game, right? We can argue that It's to really conference championship games boil down to it's a chance for the conferences and the schools to make a little bit extra cash. That's all there is to it. I saw somebody arguing against the top 4 conference champions getting a bye. It's like it should just be the top 4 regardless of teams, regardless of conference, regardless of seed, whatever. Top 4 teams in the country get a bye. And I agree, yeah, in principle. But when you are operating under the idea that like we have to make these games matter, that way we can sell tickets, sell sponsorships, sell the broadcast rights to TV. It's just a way to make extra money. For instance, in the last TV contract for the Big Ten, Fox paid, I think, $55 million more per year than ESPN did. And essentially, they were paying $55 million per year more than ESPN did for Ohio State, Michigan, and the Big Ten championship game. That's not an inconsequential amount of money. And it just got bigger during the new TV deal with NBC, CBS, and Fox. The Big Ten championship game brings in a lot of money. The SEC championship game brings in a lot of money. So they got to find a way to make sure that they stay a priority. So the way to do that is by making sure that those teams get a college football playoff berth and a guaranteed berth and a bye into the college football playoff. But that's the whole point of getting to the conference champion. You can argue that it's, well, we got to find out who the best team in the Big Ten is. We got to find out who the best big team in the Big 12 is. You really don't. You don't. If there's a 12 team and it's going to be a 14 team playoff eventually, you don't have to figure that out. You got a pretty good idea. And if you don't, you know who the top 2 teams are. And guess what? They're just going to go to the playoff. So this is kind of like the qualifying round for the college football playoff. So if that's the case, shouldn't how the committee views them matter on who makes that list? And I realize that there's probably parentheses in that qualification of the tiebreaker of whoever's ranked higher in the college football playoff. But that's where it has to end unless it's in the parentheses, if applicable. If it's not, then you can start your draw names from a hat or do a sack race or flip a quarter or whatever. But it's real easy to cut that off of, it depends on how you're ranked in the college football playoff. If there are 3 teams jockeying for position, and there's 3 teams tied for second place in the Big Ten, shouldn't you want who's the highest rated in the college football playoff to be that representative? One, because if teams number 2 and 3 are also inside the top 12, you don't want to give them an extra loss because maybe team number 3 that's tied for second place is number 14. But by these metrics, they should be the team that makes the Big Ten championship game. Well, if they lose, they're screwed. They're done, torched. Bye-bye. Your chances are gone. You're not going to move up from 14 to in the top 11 to make the college football, make spots 5 through 11 to make the playoff. So you should want the highest ranked team in the playoff rankings to have that opportunity to play in a conference championship game. And I don't know. I don't know what the argument against that would be. I don't know why the Big Ten wouldn't say, hey, other than maybe you're like the argument might be from schools, coaches, etc., is like you're farming out part of the process of deciding who is the best 2 teams in our conference to somebody else. But you're kind of already doing that anyway. So I don't understand why you wouldn't want to prioritize getting as many teams as possible in the college football playoff. And the easiest way to do that is to put whoever's ranked highest in the championship game. So instead of trying to develop your own BCS or the tied teams will be compared based on the best cumulative conference winning percentage of all conference opponents. Who's ranked higher in the goddamn poll? That's all you got to figure out. And if they're not, if the 3 teams aren't ranked in the poll, which feels like Armageddon, maybe you shouldn't have a Big Ten championship game if you've got if you got one team who's ranked in, if you got two teams who are vying for the conference championship game and neither one of them is ranked in the college football playoff poll, you got trouble right here in River City. We got issues. But that's neither here nor there. That's just easier to figure out than the two teams will be compared based on the best cumulative conference winning percentage of all conference opponents. I've read that now like 4 times, and I'm still not 100% certain exactly what that means. But you know what is really easy to figure out? Who's ranked higher in the college football playoff poll? It's really simple. And yet they didn't choose that. And I don't know why. But I think that's just my look at it, because it feels real easy and real simple to figure out that tiebreaker. I don't know that I want the tiebreakers to continue to be. If I got to get a calculator out for this damn thing, I don't like it. But that's just my look. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Would you rather the college football playoff rankings decide who makes which conference championship game? Would you like to see a sack race from the head coaches of each tied team go at it? I think that would be more fun than the cumulative conference winning percentage. Screw it. Just put James Franklin and Dan Lanning in a sack race, tug of war, whatever you want to do. They each are going to play Scrabble for an hour. Whatever. It'll be more exciting. Let me know in the comments down below. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. I appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content that we're pumping out. If you are listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.